Crossover fighting games are games where characters from multiple franchises are thrown together to battle against each other for the enjoyment of fans worldwide. These games are what happen when video game executives decide they want to make lots of money without having to risk the consequences of developing original intellectual property. I'm joking, mostly. Snark aside, crossover fighting games let you see what would happen if Mario got into a fight with Bayonetta. On that note, the biggest crossover fighting game is easily Super Smash Bros., which has legions of fans who love to speculate about which characters are coming to the series next. And for your own mental well-being, we strongly advise you never read any comment section about Smash, because Smash fans are also crazy. But crossover fighting games are more than just Super Smash Bros. Marvel vs. Capcom is an influential crossover that boasts some of the best fighting games in the entire genre. After all, it's important to know how to do an infinite.
Wait, do it! Oh! How's it taste? Keep the rhythm up! If you the rhythm, the combo will drop, Keep that up, you keep the same If you drop this it will not cool!
Even Nickelodeon is getting in on the crossover fighting game genre with Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, which features characters from franchises like SpongeBob SquarePants and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. With that in mind, today we're going to look at crossover fighting games. Not the popular ones. We're talking a walk down memory lane to dig up the crossover fighting games that have been forgotten over the years. For every Super Smash Bros. Or Marvel vs. Capcom, there's a game that featured some really weird crossover that few people ever knew existed. I'm Camille Salazar-Hadaway for The Leaderboard, and these are the crossover fighting games that you forgot existed. Let's get one thing clear. We're looking for crossover fighting games, not fighting games that happen to feature a character crossing over from somewhere else. Take Mortal Kombat 11 as an example. Just because Rambo is in the game as DLC doesn't mean it's a crossover fighting game. The fact that a game is a crossover has to be key to the game itself. We're also looking for forgotten crossover fighting games, or at the very least, games that are lesser known. So we won't be talking about more popular games like BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle or Brawlhalla, the latter of which has John Cena as an alternate playable skin for one of its characters. I really only wanted to talk about Brawlhalla so I could mention John Cena, because why is this a thing? Are we all clear? Good. With that out of the way, let's begin with a game that you probably remember, but its creator would like to see forgotten: PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Similar to Super Smash Bros. Series and concept, PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale features various PlayStation characters along with third-party fighters, fighting each other across a wide variety of mashup stages. Unlike in Smash, where you defeat opponents by knocking them out of the stage's boundaries, you could only knock out people in All-Stars by charging up and using super moves. The roster is also, well, certainly something. While there are PlayStation mainstays like Kratos from God of War and Nathan Drake from Uncharted, you've also got characters like Raiden from Metal Gear Solid and Fat Princess from Fat Princess. Not exactly the choices I would have made for the roster, but that's what developer Superbot Entertainment had to work with. Turns out, wrangling characters for crossover fighting games is hard. Hideo Kojima himself apparently mandated that Raiden would appear instead of the much more iconic Solid Snake. When it was released back in 2012, All-Stars was seen as a decent game that sold about 1 million copies. But games with those sales figures rarely get sequels, and that's certainly the case here. The online features for the game shut down in 2019, and Superbot themselves went defunct back in 2014. Now it exists only as a piece of trivia. Remember when Sony tried to make a Smash Bros. Style game? That was weird. Moving on. One of the biggest fighting game developers around is Netherrealm Studios. Their two big franchises, Mortal Kombat and Injustice, are two of the most popular fighting games today. But before it created Injustice, it made an earlier game that set the stage for the DC fighter we know and love. And this game was made before Netherrealm even existed. Back when the studio was known as Midway Games Chicago, it made Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. Beyond just being a crossover between Mortal Kombat and DC Comics, Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe has a number of features that set it apart from its successors. Namely, it's a 3D fighter, which was the style of Mortal Kombat games used at the time. Those Mortal Kombat games are not that good, and I do not recommend playing them. Furthermore, Mortal Kombat's famous fatalities have been toned down so that the game could get a teen rating. DC heroes don't have fatalities, instead using finishers called heroic brutalities. Because heroes never kill their opponents, right? Taken in a vacuum, Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe is a weird crossover between two franchises that should not work well together. Besides some awkwardness, however, the combination manages to be somewhat okay in the end. More to the point, without this game, we likely wouldn't have the much better Injustice series. If it weren't for that, Mortal Kombat vs. DC would be a footnote in the history of fighting games. As it stands, it's merely an interesting game that paved the way for much better games to come. Of the games we've covered so far, they're both big budget titles with big publishers backing them. While that's a factor in getting crossover games made, it's not required. In fact, you can make indie crossover fighting games. Case in point, Indie Pogo. It features characters from over 15 indie games with more in development, such as Shovel Knight and that one guy from Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. Indie Pogo plays a lot like Smash Brothers in that you have to knock enemies off the screen or deplete their health. Its main gameplay mechanic involves auto-jumping. Simply put, characters will automatically jump if they touch the ground, barring a handful of special moves. That means most of the fighting takes place in mid-air, with each character having a number of moves, grabs, and special abilities that let them take advantage of this. What's more, characters can start pogo combos by repeatedly jumping on their opponent's head without taking damage, which allows them to gain gems that power up their super moves. Since releasing in 2018, Indie Pogo has seen a steady stream of updates that have added new stages, characters, and modifiers for fights. And at only $15, it's a fun little title that shows that money isn't necessarily everything when it comes to crossovers. The same is true of Blade Strangers, an indie crossover fighting game that also happened to be released in 2018. It also happens to have Shovel Knight as a playable character, which makes me think that Shovel Knight will eventually be in every indie fighting game ever. Blade Strangers is a traditional 2D fighting game. It boasts a roster of characters that includes the likes of Solange from Code Princess, Kawase Umehara from, Umehara Kawase, Gunvolt from Azure Striker Gunvolt, and Isaac from The Binding of Isaac. Most of the characters are actually from either Nicalis or Studio Seizensen Games, which is fitting considering that this is the publisher and developer of Blade Strangers. It may be a crossover, but a company's gotta promote their own stuff first and foremost. It'd be like asking Nintendo why they have so many Mario characters in Smash Bros. Getting away from indie game crossovers. Sometimes there are fighting games that rely heavily on one's knowledge of characters in order for the crossover to become popular. In Marvel vs. Capcom, people recognize characters like Spider-Man, Ryu, and the various X-Men. Which is why Capcom's decision to localize Tatsunoko vs. Capcom Ultimate All-Stars in 2010 is a bit strange. The game did have a cult following outside of Japan, but only one of the two companies featured in the game is immediately recognizable. Capcom needs no introduction, but for those who don't know, Tatsunoko is a Japanese anime production company behind anime like Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, Yatterman, and Tekkaman the Space Knight. You may have heard of them before, but chances are you haven't. And I'm willing to bet you definitely haven't heard of Gold Lighten, who is a 30-foot tall golden robot that can disguise itself as a gold lighter. It's from an anime that aired in 1981, and to my knowledge, has never been localized. This is the kind of character that you can play as if you feel like Chun-Li. Beyond the obscurity of one side of this crossover, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom is also not remembered because of another reason. It came out on the Wii, which is not exactly home to a lot of fighting games. Least of all, fighting games that are relatively popular. It apparently sold well in North America, but by and large, this is a crossover that did not have much staying power in people's minds. Our next game is unique, not because of what it is in the crossover or in its gameplay, but because it hasn't been released. In fact, it might not ever come out. That game is Tekken Cross Street Fighter. Years ago, Capcom and Namco partnered together to make two crossovers featuring the Street Fighter and Tekken franchises. The first was Street Fighter Cross Tekken, which featured gameplay of Street Fighter as characters from both franchises battled it out. The other game, Tekken Cross Street Fighter, would have done the reverse. It would have similar characters, but this time, the gameplay would be a 3D fighter in the same vein as the Tekken series. Neat concept, right? Both games were announced in 2010, and Street Fighter Cross Tekken was released in 2012. Development of the other game was in progress, and people were looking forward to its release. And so, we waited, and waited, and waited some more. As the years passed, the game was still confirmed to be in development as late as 2015. Come 2016, it was announced development was being put on hold. To this day, Tekken Cross Street Fighter has yet to be officially cancelled. Even Tekken's director doesn't know the status of the game. It's in a permanent state of limbo, where it's both not in development and yet also not cancelled. It's been forgotten, and we don't see that changing anytime soon. It's at this point that I should warn the viewers, we're about to enter some really weird crossover territory. Magical Battle Arena is a 3D fighting / third-person shooter game where a bunch of magical girls from different anime fight each other because they've been thrown into the same universe. Told you we'd be getting weird. Playable characters come from anime like Cardcaptor Sakura, Magic Knight Rayearth, Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha, and Slayers. Magical Battle Arena is a Japan-only game, which is not shocking. If you want more anime crossovers, look no further than Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax. It features characters from light novels published by the Dengeki Bunko imprint, and there are a lot of them in this crossover. Sword Art Online, Durarara, A Certain Magical Index, The Devil is a Part-Timer, Strike the Blood, Toradora, and so much more. And since the game was published by Sega, there are even some characters from Sega's properties that are playable, including Virtua Fighter and Valkyria Chronicles. And unlike Magical Battle Arena, Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax was released outside of Japan. So if you really want to fight as Kirito, you can. But let's be real, why on earth would you want to suffer like that? Speaking of anime crossovers, we have to mention Jump Force. Though this is less because it's a game you've forgotten, cause really, who could forget these monstrosities? And more because it's a game we want to forget. It's a crossover where characters from different Shonen Jump franchises fight each other. But this isn't the first time this has happened. In fact, there have been a lot of Shonen Jump crossover fighting games. Jstar's Victory Versus came out in 2014 in Japan and is a 4-player fighting game in a 3D environment. Be it Bleach, One Piece, Dragon Ball, Naruto, or even Bo 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 Bo. You could play as your favorite Jump character in a game where they don't look like nightmares. If you want a Super Smash Bros. Style Jump fighting game, you don't have one option, you have 3. Jump Superstars and its sequel, Jump Ultimate Stars, are 2D fighting games for the DS that are very obviously trying to follow the Super Smash Bros. Craze. Released only in Japan, they are exactly what you need if you want to relive the glory days of mid-2000s anime fandom. The other Jump crossover fighting game is Battle Stadium DON, and only features 3 franchises: Dragon Ball, One Piece, and Naruto. Here, you don't have to knock out opponents. Instead, you just have to collect the orbs that are dropped by enemies. The winner is the person who can either collect all the orbs or the one that has the most orbs when time runs out. Despite the popularity of the series involved in these crossovers, most of the games were only released in Japan. The main reason for this was licensing issues, because it turns out that securing the rights to all of these characters in multiple countries is a giant pain in the ass. At this point, we've only been looking at games where crossovers have occurred between franchises. But it's also possible for games to be crossovers within franchises. This is the case if there are multiple different series within a franchise, such as Final Fantasy. It's how we got the Dissidia series, and the money is still out on whether that's a good thing or not. A forgotten, or at least lesser known fighting game in this vein is the action fighting hybrid that is the Gundam Versus series. Having been around under various names since 2008, Gundam Versus pits the mobile suits, of various series under the Gundam banner against each other. Want to pilot Mora Ray's famous RX-78-2 Gundam? Go right ahead. Want to hop in the front seat of Mikozuki's August ASW G08 Barbatos? You could do that. Have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about? Don't worry. It's basically a game where big mechs, mobile suits, fight each other in big arena battles. It's also a game with a character who's actually named Full Frontal, which is certainly a choice. And if you don't like Gundam, all you have to do is pick any series and start watching. Most of them are good, except for Gundam Seed. There are better shows out there. If you want more traditional crossover fighting game that is somehow more niche, take a look at Tales of Versus. Exclusively released in Japan, Tales of Versus is a crossover starring many of the characters from Namco Bandai's Tales RPG series. It has 2 versus 2 fighters that actually tries to replicate the fighting style of the series it's based on, due to the fact that the Tales series is actually an action RPG where you can control the characters directly. That means skills and the ability to level up a character's stats in between battles using an experience system. And just like many of the other games in this video, it did not receive a release outside of Japan. What was released worldwide, however, was the Digimon Rumble series. Composed of 3 different games released across 13 years, Digimon Rumble are fighting games where Digimon from different series in the franchise battle each other in what is very clearly a Super Smash Bros. Clone. It turns out that selling millions of copies worldwide will cause other games to try and copy your formula for success. Who knew? The main difference between Digimon Rumble and Smash Bros. Is the inclusion of a health bar in the former. You could even digivolve mid-battle should you fulfill the requirements, which is admittedly pretty cool. Digimon Rumble Arena and Digimon Rumble Arena 2 both feature 2D levels. Digimon All-Star Rumble shifts to 3D arenas. Unless you are a Digimon fan, however, we can't in good conscience recommend these games. Moving on from anime games, we have one of the lesser-known Capcom crossovers, Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix. Released in 1997 in arcades, this is a fighting game featuring characters from Street Fighter, Darkstalkers, and Red Earth. Only in this game, every character is done in a chibi style. So cute! This is because the sprites were previously used for Super Street Fighter Puzzle 2 Turbo, which has a nearly identical roster. And unlike most other Capcom fighters, Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix adds elements of randomness to the gameplay, with the inclusion of items and gems that can be used to power up your characters. It's a lighthearted game all told, and one that has gone under the radar due to the enduring popularity of both the Street Fighter puzzle games and other Capcom crossovers. While Capcom is responsible for many fighting game crossovers, it's not alone in that boat. Take Geo Battle Coliseum, a fighting game that stars characters from SNK-developed series like Fatal Fury, Samurai Showdown, Metal Slug, and The Last Blade, among others. And like a certain other Capcom crossover series that came out a few years before, Geo Battle Coliseum features tag team battles. Now take a moment and look at the gameplay. Look at the graphics, both of the characters and of the background, and try to guess what year this game came out. I'll give you a few seconds. Alright, what did you guess? Maybe 2000 or 2001? Actually, Geo Battle Coliseum was released in the second half of 2005 around the world. This game was dated, even for its time, and it shows. But at least it's a crossover that makes sense. The next crossover fighting game is a fever dream by comparison. Dream Mix TV World Fighters is what happens when Konami, Hudson Soft, and Takara, a company that releases Hasbro toys in Japan, work together to make a fighting game. The result is absolutely insane. It's got characters like Simon Belmont, Solid Snake, and Bomberman up against the likes of Optimus Prime and Tyson Granger. Don't know who Tyson is? He's the main character of the original Beyblade series. This isn't even getting into the fact that DreamMix TV World Fighters also features Lika-chan, who is basically the Japanese version of Barbie. This game is weird as hell, and it might be the strangest collection of characters to ever appear in a crossover fighting game together. But for our money, it doesn't have the best character to ever cross over into a fighting game. That honor belongs to Fighters Megamix, a crossover fighting game that mostly features characters from Virtua Fighter and Fighting Vipers. Other characters include Bark the Polar Bear from Sonic the Fighters, a deformed version of Virtua Fighter star Akira Yuki from Virtua Fighter Kids, and Rent-A-Hero from the Japan-only game of the same name. These are neat characters, but they are not the highlight of this game. That's because there is one character that outshines every other character in any crossover fighting game, period. Hell, let me just go out there and say this. Fighters Megamix is the most ambitious crossover ever made because of this one character. Avengers Infinity War? Move out the way. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate? It can't even compete. Am I hyping this too much? Probably, but I don't care. You need to see the glory that is the best crossover character of all time. One piece of advice, you may want to turn the volume down for this next bit. That's right, Fighters Megamix features a playable character, the Hornet from Daytona, USA. Whoever thought to put a car as an actual fighting game character deserves millions of dollars and a spot in the Video Game Hall of Fame. And it's not like it's a robot disguised as a car, it's just the Hornet, which is somehow capable of walking on two tires and punching with its other two tires. This is easily the most bizarre character in fighting game history. And yet, few people remember the greatness that is Fighters Megamix for daring to put something this stupid in a game. But you know what this means, right? We should preserve Fighters Megamix's legacy by doing what needs to be done. Hashtag Daytona USA and Smash. Thanks for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed learning about a whole bunch of crossover fighting games. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this.